The afternoon was winding down at the Riverside Community Fair when Stephen M. Fox realized he could no longer see his daughter. He turned from the grilled corn stand, paper cup in hand, scanning the crowd. Families, strollers, a man selling wind chimes. No Sandy. His chest tightened. That specific fear only single parents know. He moved fast, weaving through booths, calling her name above the music. He found her near the far end of the fairground, sitting cross-legged on a low bench beside a woman he couldn't see clearly yet. Sandy was talking at full speed, the way she always did when someone had made the mistake of being kind to her. The woman was pressing a small bandage onto Sandy's knee, nodding, laughing softly at the right moments. Stephen exhaled. He slowed his steps. Then the woman looked up. Time did something strange, not dramatic, not loud, just slow. The kind of slow that happens when your body understands something before your mind is ready to catch up. He knew that face. He had spent 5 years making sure he'd never see it again. Sandy jumped up the moment she spotted him, pointing back at the woman with both hands like she'd just found buried treasure. "Daddy, she found me when I got lost. She fixed my knee. And she knows about buildings, like you." Stephen's jaw tightened. His voice came out quieter than he intended. "Sandy, come here, baby." But his daughter was already reaching back for the woman's hand, and before Stephen could say another word, he was about to find out exactly how much a 7-year-old could dismantle in 30 seconds flat. Before we continue, please tell us in the comments section where you're watching this video from, so we can know how far our stories reach. And also subscribe to the channel to help us grow and get to our 500 subscribers milestone. Stephen took Sandy's hand and walked away from that bench without looking back. Not a word, not a nod, nothing. He wrapped his fingers around his daughter's small wrist, turned and moved, steady, purposeful, back through the crowd toward the parking lot. Sandy had to jog to keep up. She was still talking. "And she didn't even make me feel dumb for getting lost. She just sat with me and asked me about my drawings and said I had real talent, Daddy. She actually said that. Real talent." "Mm-hmm. And her name is Susan. Isn't that a pretty name? She has these earrings that look like little moons, and she smelled like flowers. Not the fake kind, the real kind." "Sandy?" "And she said she works with buildings, too. Did you hear that part? I told her you were an architect, and she got this look on her face like, 'Daddy, are you even listening?'" He was listening. That was the problem. He got her buckled in the back seat, closed the door, and stood beside the car for 3 seconds with his eyes shut and his hand flat against the roof. The metal was warm from the afternoon sun. He pressed down on it like it was the only solid thing left. Then he got in, started the engine, pulled out. The drive home was 20 minutes. Stephen made it in silence, one hand on the wheel. Sandy eventually stopped talking and turned to watch the streets through her window. She was 7, but she was sharp. She could read a room or a car better than most grown-ups Stephen knew. He made dinner, pasta with the turkey sauce Sandy liked, extra garlic. He set the table, poured her juice, sat across from her. They ate. Sandy talked about a girl at the fair who had a dog that knew 3 tricks. She talked about a wind chime she wanted. She talked about everything except the woman on the bench, as if she'd quietly decided to give him room without being asked. He loved her so much it sometimes felt like a weight on his chest. After dinner, while he washed dishes and she sat at the kitchen table with her sketchbook, the wide-ruled one with the sunflower on the cover, the evening settled soft around them. The hiss of water, the scratch of her pencil, the distant pulse of the city outside. He turned off the faucet and dried his hands. "Can I see what you're drawing?" Sandy looked up. Something in her face shifted. A small, careful brightness, like she'd been waiting for exactly that question. She slid the sketchbook across the table without a word. He'd seen hundreds of Sandy's drawings. She drew the neighbor's cat, the skyline from their fire escape, his mother Norma asleep in her armchair with her mouth open. Sandy drew the world the way she experienced it, full of warmth and detail, always with that slight generosity in the eyes she gave every face, like everyone she saw deserved to look a little kinder than they probably were. The woman on the page was drawn the same way, but Stephen would have known her in any version, any angle, any style. The shape of that face, the way the hair fell, the earrings, small crescents, the ones Susan had bought from a street vendor in downtown Chicago the weekend of their very first trip together. They'd been laughing in the rain about nothing, young and completely certain that everything would work out. He hadn't let himself think about those earrings in 5 years. Written in careful block letters at the bottom of the page, Susan, the Jasmine lady, my favorite person from today. The kitchen went very still. Stephen set the sketchbook down slowly, the way you set down something that might break. He pressed both hands flat against the table's edge and stayed there. Sandy was watching him. "Do you like it?" she asked. Smaller voice now, careful. He looked at his daughter. Those bright, searching eyes, that little crease between her brows that appeared whenever she was trying to understand something too big for words. He smiled. It cost him something. "It's beautiful, Bug. You drew her really well." Sandy relaxed. She pulled the book back and tilted her head, studying her own drawing. "I want to see her again," she said simply. "I told her about our fire escape where we watched the trains. She said that sounded wonderful. Maybe we could invite her sometime." "We'll see," Stephen said. He turned back to the sink, faucet on, water running longer than necessary. Behind him, the soft sound of Sandy tearing a page from her sketchbook. "Daddy?" He turned. She was holding the drawing out across the table. Portrait of Susan, soft pencil lines, crescent earrings, oversized, kind eyes, expression open, earnest, completely without guile. "You can keep it," she said, "in case you forget what she looks like, for when we find her again." Stephen stood there with that drawing in his hand, and for the first time since the parking lot, he didn't trust himself to speak. Not because of the anger. The anger he knew how to hold. It was the other thing, the thing beneath the anger, the thing he had been absolutely certain was gone. That was what scared him. And that night, he didn't throw the drawing away. He couldn't. But what he did next, what he told himself it meant, that was where it started to get complicated. He put the drawing in the kitchen drawer, not the trash. He'd stood over it for 5 full seconds. Couldn't do it. Not because of Susan, because Sandy had signed it in careful block letters and pressed it into his hands like a gift. And Stephen M. Fox did not throw away his daughter's gifts. So he folded it once, slid it beneath the takeout menus and expired coupons. Out of sight. That would have to be enough. He didn't sleep well. By Thursday, he'd made a decision. He wasn't going looking. He wasn't going to call anyone, search anything, or do what part of him had already started doing at 2 a.m., pulling up blank browser tabs and closing them without typing a single word. But he needed to know she wasn't close. That was all. Confirmation of distance. He called Charles. Charles K. Mitchell had been Stephen's closest friend since their second year of university. The kind of man who showed up with food when you didn't ask, who remembered things you mentioned once and never brought up again unless you did, who had sat with Stephen through the worst of it 5 years ago without once telling him what to feel. He was also, unfortunately, completely incapable of lying to Stephen's face. They both knew it. "I need you to do something," Stephen said, "and I need you to not make it a thing." A pause. "Those are always my favorites. Go ahead." "There's a community design workshop this weekend, Riverside District. I need you to go. Look around. Tell me if someone named Susan Tsan is involved. A longer pause. Stephen. I know. Is this about what Sandy said at the... I said I know, Charles. The silence between them had weight, the kind that only exists between people who've been honest with each other for a long time. I'll go, Charles said, but you owe me dinner, somewhere with tablecloths. Fine. Charles called back Sunday evening, just after Sandy went to bed. Stephen was on the fire escape with cold coffee, watching the last commuter train cut its light through the dark below. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, looked at the city, picked up. Talk, he said. Charles was quiet for a moment, organizing something he didn't know how to hand over. She was there, he said. Stephen said nothing. She ran the second session. Urban green infrastructure. Community gardens built into low-income residential blocks. 20 people in the room, Steve. Every single one of them engaged. Not politely, actually engaged. A beat. After the session, she stayed 40 extra minutes taking questions from residents in the Elmwood corridor. No fee. I confirmed it. The train disappeared around a bend. The tracks went dark. She's running a nonprofit, Charles continued. Carolyn T. Foster, City Community Outreach, told me Susan launched it 3 years ago. Small staff, 0 corporate backing. 6 vacant lots turned into community gardens. 2 of them are now city-funded. The waitlist for their next project is pushing 200 families. Stephen pressed his thumb and forefinger to the bridge of his nose. That doesn't change anything, he said. I know. What she did. I know what she did. Charles's voice was steady, not defensive, just present. I was there. I watched you lose the Hallman Commission. I watched you get passed over at Dreyfus because her name was in the wrong ear. I carried boxes when you had to leave the studio with a 2-year-old on your hip. He exhaled. I'm not telling you to forget it. I'm telling you what I saw. A pause. There was a moment near the end, Charles said. Someone in the room mentioned the Alderman Center project, the mixed-use redesign from about 6 years back. Stephen's hand tightened on the railing. The Alderman Center, his design. 18 months of work. The project that won a regional architecture award the year after he and Susan split, credited entirely to her, his contributions buried in the fine print of a firm she'd quietly restructured. She went quiet, Charles said, right in the middle of the conversation. Just stopped, then redirected the whole discussion. He paused. It looked like it cost her something, Steve. I've been sitting with that all day. Stephen didn't respond. I'm not saying she's a good person, Charles said carefully. I'm saying she might not be exactly the same person you knew. And I don't know what to do with that either. I just thought you deserved the truth of what I actually saw. They stayed on the line without speaking. Below, a couple walked the sidewalk hand in hand. Their laughter drifted up and dissolved before it reached him. Thanks, Stephen said. Tablecloths. Yeah. He hung up, sat in the cooling dark. He was still outside when his phone buzzed again. Not Charles, his mother. Norma S. Cruz did not call at 9:30 on a Sunday for small talk. Sandy called me today, she said, without greeting. Stephen went still. She asked me if I knew a lady named Susan. Said she met her at the fair. Said she wants to see her again. A controlled breath. Stephen, tell me that child did not meet who I think she met. Mama, tell me. The silence was its own answer. He heard his mother exhale, slow and deliberate, the sound of a woman relocking a door she'd spent 5 years helping her son keep shut. "You keep that woman away from my granddaughter," she said. "I don't care what she's doing now. I don't care what Charles thinks he saw. Some debts don't get paid back. Some things you do not let back through the door." She hung up before he could respond. Stephen sat in the dark with his mother's words on one side, Charles's on the other, and somewhere inside the kitchen wall, folded between expired coupons, a little girl's drawing of a face he had tried for 5 years to forget. He thought he had a few more days to decide what to do with all of it. He was wrong. Susan had already made her move. The week after Norma's call, Stephen took on extra work. He picked up the revision load for the Mercer Street proposal, stayed late twice redrafting notes on a community center project not due for 3 more weeks. His colleague, Moises S. Escobar, stopped by his desk on Wednesday, looked at the sea of drawings covering every surface, and said simply, "You good?" "Busy," Stephen said, without looking up. Moises set a takeout container of jerk chicken on the corner of the desk and walked away without another word. That was Moises. He never pushed. He just made sure you ate. Stephen worked through dinner. He told himself it was still enough, this life. The early mornings, the school runs, the billable hours. The grief kept small and filed away. For 5 years that formula had held. He told himself it was still holding. By Friday, he almost believed it. Mary R. Edens had been the office manager at Fox & Partners for 3 years. Methodical, discreet, a talent for handling things without requiring explanation. She kept the front desk the way a careful person keeps a home. Everything in its place, nothing left unaddressed. She stopped him Friday afternoon as he was heading out. "There's something for you," she said. She slid a cream-colored envelope across the counter. No firm name, no return address. Just his name, written neat and careful, like someone who had rewritten it more than once. "Who left this?" Mary's expression was not quite neutral. "A woman came in this morning, asked if you worked here. I told her I couldn't confirm staff details." A pause. "She said she understood, said you didn't have to read it." Another pause, more deliberate. "She seemed tired, not in a bad way, like someone who'd made a hard decision and was trying to do it anyway." Stephen looked at the envelope. Mary turned back to her screen. He carried it to the parking structure and sat with it in his lap for 4 minutes before he opened it. The garage was nearly empty. Overhead lights hummed. Someone's car alarm chirped distantly 2 levels up. Friday evening beginning to exhale around him. He opened the envelope. 2 pages, handwritten. Plain paper, no letterhead, no greeting, as if she'd tried several and none of them had been honest enough. "I saw a little girl's drawing at the Riverside Fair last weekend. Her name was Sandy. She told me her father was an architect named Fox, and she drew my portrait before I could say anything. I didn't understand until I was home that night and finally sat with it long enough to let myself understand. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I want to be clear about that before you stop reading. I'm writing because you deserve the truth without performance. You've had enough of both from me." What I did with the Alderman Center proposal was theft. Not the complicated kind people argue about in conference rooms. The straightforward kind. I restructured the firm specifically to bury your contributions below the line of public credit. I used my relationship with Stephen L. Edmonds at the regional board to keep your name off the award nomination. I told myself the lines were blurry. They weren't. I knew exactly what I was doing. I chose my career over your name at the moment it would cost you most. I don't expect you to forgive that. I'm not asking you to. I left the city 2 years after you did. Not because I was pushed out. I left because I kept walking into the silence of what I'd done. Awards on the wall I couldn't look at directly. Colleagues praising work I knew the origin of. I carried it for a long time. Then I couldn't anymore. The nonprofit is not penance. It's just the only work I've found that doesn't have a shadow behind it. Your daughter is extraordinary. She talked about you for 20 minutes. The way she described you, your patience, the way you fix things, the way you read to her every night. I could hear how much she loves you in every single word. You built something real, Stephen. You should know that. I don't need a response. I needed you to have the unmanaged version of the truth, because you were always owed it, and I was always too afraid to give it. Susan. Stephen sat in that parking structure for a long time. The car alarm had gone silent. The overhead lights kept their flat, indifferent hum. He sat with the pages loose between his fingers, staring at the gray concrete wall without seeing it. He had spent 5 years building a version of Susan Tsan he could stay angry at cleanly. No remorse, no reckoning. Just ambition that had moved through his life, taken what it wanted, and kept going. That version was easy to keep behind glass. That version he knew how to handle. This was not that version. He folded the letter along its original creases, slid it into the inside pocket of his jacket, against his chest, where he'd feel it the entire drive home. He didn't call Charles, didn't call Norma. He drove home, picked Sandy up from the neighbors, made grilled cheese for dinner, read her 2 chapters of her library book until she fell asleep with her cheek pressed into his shoulder. Didn't say a word to anyone. But that night, for the first time in 5 years, he took the drawing out of the kitchen drawer. He unfolded it carefully. Sunflower paper, soft pencil lines, crescent earrings, the oversized, kind eyes Sandy gave every face she drew. He set it on the kitchen table and looked at it for a long time. Then he reached for his phone, opened a new message, typed 2 words. I read it, and his thumb hovered over Susan's number until the screen went dark in his hand. He set the phone down. He wasn't ready, but something had changed. The first crack in a dam is almost invisible until the water finds it. He put the drawing back in the drawer, this time not under the takeout menus, right on top. He thought he had time to decide. He didn't know that Sandy had already been watching, and what she'd heard, and what she'd decided it meant about herself, was about to break him open faster than any letter ever could. 4 days passed. Stephen said nothing to anyone. He carried the letter in his jacket Monday and Tuesday, moved it to his desk drawer Wednesday, brought it back to his jacket Thursday. An unresolved thing that refused to be filed. He kept the draft message on his phone. I read it, suspended between sending and silence, between the man he'd been for 5 years and whatever came after. By Thursday evening, he was tired in a way that sleep didn't reach. Norma came Saturday, a little before noon, foil-wrapped dish in her arms, keys already out at the door. Sandy heard the knock first and ran to let her in. For a while, the apartment held the comfortable noise of both of them in the kitchen, Norma directing, Sandy helping, both talking across each other the way they always did. Stephen sat at the dining table with structural plans he wasn't really reading, glad for the noise. He should have noticed when the kitchen went quiet. Norma appeared in the doorway, dish towel in hand, and looked at him the way she had since he was a boy, like she could read his silences the way other people read faces. She left something at your office, Norma said. Stephen looked up. Mary told you? Mary mentioned a woman came in. She sat across from him, voice low, controlled. Did you read it? Yes. Norma's hands went flat on the table. Whatever she wrote, whatever she admitted, it doesn't restore 5 years. It doesn't give back the Hallman Commission. It doesn't undo the doors that closed because her name was in the wrong ears. Her eyes were steady and certain and full of love. She found your office, Stephen. That's not an accident. That's a woman who knows exactly how generous you are and exactly where to aim it. Mama, I raised you to be kind, she said, cutting him off gently. And that's beautiful. But some people rely on your kindness because they've already mapped it. Don't let her do it again. Stephen opened his mouth, and then he heard it. The soft click of Sandy's bedroom door, which he'd assumed was closed. The hallway was empty, but the air had shifted the way it does when a child has just moved through it in deliberate silence. He stood. Norma turned toward the hallway and understood a half second after he did. The front door was not fully closed. Sandy sat on the top step of the building's front stoop, knees pulled to her chest, small back curved against the stone railing. October afternoon light falling long and gold across the sidewalk. Her sketchbook was in her lap, but she wasn't drawing. She was just holding it, arms wrapped around it like it was the only solid thing available. Stephen sat down beside her. He didn't speak right away. He let the city fill the quiet. A bus half a block down, music drifting from an open window above, the thin rustle of a plastic bag in the gutter. Sandy didn't look at him. He noticed what was on top of the sketchbook, held flat by both her palms. The drawing, his drawing, the one she'd given him. He'd left it on top of the kitchen drawer. She'd found it, taken it, brought it out here without him knowing. She was pressing it flat, protecting it, or holding it responsible for something. Bug, he said quietly. Her shoulders moved, not a shrug, something smaller, a flinch that stopped itself before it finished. Did I hear wrong? She asked, voice careful. The voice children use when they're managing something much too large for them. About the Jasmine lady. You heard some of it, he said. Yeah. Is she the one who hurt you? He looked at her profile, the stubborn set of her jaw, the way she was blinking too steadily, which was what Sandy did when she was working hard not to cry in front of him. She did something a long time ago, he said. That's true. She nodded once, tight and small. Then she said the thing he hadn't seen coming, the thing that reached past every wall, every silence, every carefully managed year, and found the one place in him with no defense at all. Did I make it worse? She asked. By liking her? 7 words, soft as anything. Stephen turned to face her fully. Sandy, look at me. She turned. Her eyes were bright. One tear had already escaped, halfway down her cheek. She hadn't decided yet whether to acknowledge it. You did not do anything wrong, he said, each word placed with care. Not one thing. You sat with someone who needed company. You were kind because that's who you are. That is never, not once in your whole life, something to apologize for. Her chin was trembling. But now you're sad. I was already sad, Bug. He reached over and tucked a braid behind her ear. You didn't make me sad. That was already there. You just walked me into a room I'd been avoiding for a long time. And that's okay. Sometimes we need help getting through the door. Sandy studied his face the way she always did when she was deciding whether to fully believe something. Then she leaned into him, her head against his arm, the drawing still held between her hands. I kept it, she said quietly. I didn't want you to put it back in the drawer. I know. She was nice to me, Daddy. A pause. I don't think nice people are always nice, but I think she was. Stephen rested his chin on top of her head and looked out at the street. The ordinary Saturday of it. The city moving past without any idea what was happening on this specific step. Yeah, he said softly. I think she might have been. They sat in the October light until it started to cool. He held his daughter close and, for the first time in 5 years, let himself sit with the full weight of it, all of it, without trying to fold it smaller. Later, after Norma's careful goodbyes and the apartment settled back to quiet, Stephen stood in the kitchen. Sandy was in her room, drawing. He could hear her pencil from the hallway. He reached into his jacket, took out his phone, opened the draft. I read it. He pressed send. Then he set the phone face down on the counter, walked to the window, and looked out at the city. He had no idea she would respond in 11 minutes. And he had no idea what she said in those 11 minutes would pull him toward the hardest conversation of his life. She replied in 11 minutes. He was still at the window when the phone buzzed face up on the counter. He looked at it the way you look at something you've been dreading and needing in equal measure, knowing there was no putting it back now. Thank you for telling me. I don't expect anything more than that. He read it twice, set the phone down, picked it up again. Then he did the thing that surprised even him. He called her. 3 rings. He stood still, one hand on the window frame, the city going about its business below, a delivery truck idling, a couple arguing softly outside the laundromat, a kid on a bicycle weaving through it all without a care. Ordinary life. Completely unaware of what was happening in this kitchen. She picked up. Stephen. Just his name. No performance in it. Quieter than he remembered. More certain than he expected. I'm not calling to forgive you, he said. Steadier than he felt. I want to be clear. I know, she said. I'm calling because I can't keep carrying this at the weight I've been carrying it. And that's for me, not for you. That's fair. I need to sit across from you, he said. Once. Say what I need to say. Hear what you need to say. Not letters, not secondhand. After that, I don't know what happens. But I need the once. She went quiet long enough that he thought she might be crying. When she spoke, her voice was even, barely. Tell me when and where. I'll be there. He chose a coffee shop 3 blocks from his office. Neutral ground. Public enough to feel safe. Quiet enough for honesty. Thursday. Midday. Both arriving separately. He didn't sleep well Wednesday night, but it was a different kind of sleeplessness, not grinding and avoidant, the kind that comes before something real. She was already there when he walked in, near the back, both hands around a coffee cup, jacket folded on the chair beside her. She looked up when he came through the door, relief crossing her face, or the particular anxiety of someone who wasn't sure the other person would actually show. She had the crescent earrings on. He noticed, then noticed himself noticing, then sat down. A server came. He ordered coffee. They waited in a silence that wasn't comfortable, but was honest. 2 people who had agreed in advance not to fill the space with anything untrue. He spoke first. He told her what the 5 years had actually looked like, not the version designed to produce guilt, the real one. The afternoon he called the Dreyfus firm and heard the careful pause before being told the position was no longer available. Sandy, at 2 years old, asleep in a second-hand crib in the corner of a 1-room sublet while he rebuilt a portfolio from scratch at the kitchen table. The night he found the architecture journal, the award ceremony, her name above his work, a room full of applause, and put the magazine directly into the recycling without finishing the article. She didn't interrupt, didn't deflect, didn't manage his reaction. She sat with every word the way the letter had promised she would. When he finished, she looked down at her cup for a moment, then back up. I'm not going to say sorry in a way that asks you to feel better about it, she said. I'm going to say sorry in the way that means I understand exactly what I did. I'd undo it if I could, and I can't. She paused. I've been trying to figure out how to live honestly with that ever since I stopped being able to live dishonestly with it. They talked for 1 hour and 40 minutes. Not about forgiveness, not about what came next, just the truth of what had happened, laid out between them like old blueprints finally unrolled. It was not easy. It was not warm. There were long silences and at least one moment where Stephen stared at the wall and breathed through something that wanted to come out much louder than the coffee shop would allow. But he left without the weight, not without the memory, not without the history, without the specific, crushing mass of carrying it alone in silence for 5 years. He sat in his car and pressed both palms to the steering wheel and breathed, feeling exactly how much lighter his own chest was. He let that be what it was. He was not healed. He knew that clearly. But he was in the process of it. 3 weeks later, on a bright Saturday in November, the last of autumn's warmth hanging on by a thread, he brought Sandy to the community garden project in the Elmwood corridor. He told her they were volunteering, that the woman who ran it was someone he knew. Sandy had looked at him for a long, quiet moment, the searching look she used when she was reading between the words, then nodded with a seriousness that made her look briefly, startlingly older than 7. She recognized Susan the moment they came through the gate. She didn't run. She slowed. She looked up at her father and waited. "Go ahead, Bug," he said. Sandy walked toward her with the careful dignity of a child who has learned something recently about the complexity of grown-up things. Susan looked up from a tray of marigold seedlings. She went still when she saw Sandy. Then she saw Stephen, a few paces behind, hands in his jacket pockets, watching. Susan crouched down to Sandy's level. "Hi," Sandy said. "Hi, Sandy." Susan's voice was steady, but her eyes were full. "I'm really glad you came." Sandy looked at the tray of seedlings. Small, orange bright, reaching toward the weak November sun. "Can I plant one?" she asked. "I was hoping you'd ask." They knelt together in the cold dirt. Sandy pressed a marigold into the earth with both thumbs the way Susan showed her. Her questions about what would grow back in spring carried clearly across the garden. Moises appeared at Stephen's shoulder, coffee in hand, squinting into the low sun. "You good?" Same 2 words, same tone. Stephen watched his daughter brush dirt from her palms and immediately reach for another seedling, talking at full speed now, her earlier caution set down completely. The way only children can, without ceremony, the moment the heart decides it's safe. He reached into his jacket pocket, felt the envelope, the letter. He still carried it. He didn't know when he'd stop. "Getting there," he said. Moises nodded once, the way men nod when they understand that getting there is the whole story. And everything else is just the distance between where you were and where you're standing now. Stephen looked at Sandy, looked at Susan leaning over to guide her hands in the dirt, looked at the small orange flowers going into the cold ground one by one. He was not finished. He knew that. But for the first time in 5 years, the wall had a door in it. And the door was open, just enough for the light to find the work that was left to do. We appreciate you listening to the end. Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories like this, and tell us in the comments what you think should happen next.